Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. Today's episode is sponsored by Costumes Rental Corporation. Today's guest is an award-winning costume designer born in Newcastle Upon Tyne and studied fashion design at Northumbria University, where she obtained her degree. After graduating, she moved into television, primarily working for the BBC as an assistant costume designer, and I found out she worked on Doctor Who, eventually designing her own projects, most notably the BBC's prestigious Screen 1 and Screen 2 series of one-off films. Some of the films she's known for are The Full Monty, Sliding Doors, Johnny English, 3 films for Woody Allen, Matchpoint, Scoop, and Cassandra's Dream, and My Week with Marilyn. And most recently, she finished Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. For the past 3 years, she's been working on the Mission Impossible franchise, and she is now currently working on Part 2. Without further ado, please welcome award-winning costume designer Jill Taylor to the Designing Hollywood Show.
Hello, very nice to meet you. Are you Rob or Robert?
Rob, call me Rob. Rob,
Okay,
Bob,
Rob.
whatever you prefer. Now,
Okay, Rob.
as we're talking, you told me that you worked on Doctor Who. I mean, you came up in the BBC, and I got to start there because I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. Doctor Who is, of course, beloved. It goes all the way back to the early 60s in the UK. Did you grow up watching Doctor Who, and who is your favorite Doctor?
I did grow up watching Doctor Who. I remember as a very, very, very little girl being absolutely terrified by the first Doctor, which I think was an actor called William Hartnell.
Yes, it was.
He was the first Doctor. And I remember hiding behind the sofa when I was a tiny little girl about some giant worms that were on TV. I guess my Doctor, I was not really into Doctor Who. My little brother was more into it. I guess my Doctor, I suppose, as a child, was Patrick Troughton.
Of course.
Merging into John Pertwee.
Right.
I could have sort of just hit that when I was about 10, maybe not even 10, 8, something like that. But yeah, they were kind of my Doctors when I watched it. And I remember it was always on a Saturday afternoon at about 5 o'clock in the evening.
We got Doctor Who a little later, so Tom Baker was my first Doctor.
Ah, right.
You know, because it came later, and I got to see things like that, like those shows from Britain that I love, like The Prisoner with Patrick McGowan and Doctor Who, and the Jerry Anderson stuff was I got that later in life, which I felt deprived by.
He was my first crush, Scott Tracy. I didn't realize he was a puppet. I didn't realize the goddamn thing was a puppet.
No, a super marionette. He was a super marionette.
A super marionette, and I didn't realize when I was about 5, I think, that he was a puppet.
Wow.
And I always aspired to be Lady Penelope. I had all the toys. I don't know what happened to them all. I remember getting a Lady Penelope doll and a Parker and the car and Scott. And we had Thunderbird 2 with the pod that popped out.
It's the greatest. That Dinky Toys made those. They were die-cast metal toys.
We had a bit. My brother had a big plastic one.
Yeah,
it was big. And
you can still get them. You know, I saw a guy once. I was going to London, and he had a T-shirt on, and the T-shirt was Parker and Lady Penelope, and it had little thought bubbles or voice bubbles, and Lady Penelope says, "Why do you work for me, Parker?" And the Aunt Parker was saying, "'Cause you're a cheeky bitch, m'lady." And I was like, my whole life I've been looking for that shirt, and I'm like, who made that shirt? But
who made that shirt? I
I
often refer, when we're doing fittings sometimes and whatever. I mean, many years ago I did something called The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, and I would often refer to Charlize Theron as it's Lady Penelope undercover at the ski lodge.
Oh, if they ever, they did make a live action. Jonathan Frakes directed a live action version of the Thunderbirds, but it kind of wasn't.
I went for that movie. I went for that interview.
Did you really?
He didn't give me the job, but I went for the interview. Yeah.
Oh, well, now you've got a better job. But, it's kind of funny. I think that somebody should make the epic live action. That movie was more directed at kids. But if they made a Thunderbirds movie with a Mission Impossible James Bond bent, so it was made for
right.
with the technology and everything. I think it'd be great. Well, let me ask.
Uniforms.
Oh, the clothes in all of the Jerry Anderson productions. I mean, Rudy.
They were designed by Sylvia.
Yeah, Sylvia did, and then like when he went on and did live action and did Space 1999, Rudy Gernreich. He designed the moon costumes in Space 1999. I mean, they those and UFO with the women with the purple hair that ran Moonbase, and they had the silver.
I love that. Yeah,
it's fantastic. And
Martin Landau, and Barbara Bain, weren't they? Space 19.
That's right. Yes, they were.
Yeah.
And where did they meet? On the original Mission Impossible TV series.
They did.
Yeah.
Which I also loved as a kid.
It was fantastic.
I also loved as a kid. Yeah. Still the best theme tune ever.
Oh, one of the great things about the Mission Impossible movies is how the theme song has been reinterpreted. I mean, you had you had Larry Mullen Jr. and The Edge doing a version of it. Fantastic. And this one, was it Lauren Balfe?
Lauren Balfe.
That was
I was sitting in the sound edit with both Tom and McHugh, and they were listening to the different arrangements for which one they were going to have. It's a great theme tune. It's fantastic.
And I love how they've retained the fact that they show you clips from what you're about to see in the opening. I figured, but they did it too, and they've managed to reinvent it each time, and I really enjoyed how they did it for Dead Reckoning Part 1. But before we get to that, now that I've got your Doctor Who bona fides, and I want to take you back to, you obviously were a connoisseur back in the day, but how did you decide to get involved in costume design? Was it something that you always wanted to do? Did you go to school for it?
Pretty much.
How did it happen?
I did. My grandmother, who was a huge Betty Davis, Joan Crawford fan, Barbara Stanwyck fan, and in England on Saturday afternoons, they always had a Saturday afternoon matinee on TV. And I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother sometimes, I did. To spend Saturdays sometimes with her. She looked after me. And she would sit me down and we would watch a Betty Davis movie or a Joan Crawford movie, Barbara Stanwyck movie, and I just became a huge fan. So I think I was about the age of 10 when I thought this would be a cool job. I'd like to do this. I always loved their clothes. All the clothes. I mean, now Voyager is still one of my favorite movies. And so I thought this would be a cool job. This is what I'd like to do. And so in England, you have something called careers officers. And they sat us down when we were 13 and said, what would you like to do? And I said, I want to go in the film business. I want to be a costume designer. Well, from where I come from in the world, Newcastle Upon Tyne, it's an old mining town. I mean, that's, you didn't go into the film business in this town. You just didn't. So they made me do shorthand and typing and all the things I really wanted to do at school, like art and history. I love history. All those things I wasn't allowed to do because the curriculum, because I said I was going in the film business, the curriculum they gave me was all to do with something to fall back on in life when I fail going in the film business.
Trying to turn you into a secretary.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Nothing wrong with that at all. And then my mother decided that I was clearly had a screw loose and thought it set me up for an interview with a bank. So I said, I'm not doing that. And so I was about 16 then. I wanted to go to art school. So I did 2 years foundation. For the American listeners, I don't quite know how that equates to high school, but it was a 2-year course from 16 to 18. You did all the, different disciplines of art. So I did that, and then somebody said to me, you can illustrate fashion really well. And I should explain that my parents divorced, and I got a stepmother who's still with us.
Oh, that's good.
And my dad and my stepmom had when the TV regions in England all started opening up in the late 60s, my dad managed to wangle his way in as a wardrobe master. God knows how, but he did. And with no qualifications, no nothing other than he liked clothes. But what he did do was get my stepmother in to that environment, and she had been a window dresser, and she had gone to art school in the early 1960s, and I inherited all her old drawings, so I used to sit and copy her drawings.
Wow.
And so by the time I got to foundation course when I was 16, 17, and I could draw fashion. One of the tutors said to me, you should go and do a fashion course. I said, well, I wanted to work in the film business. He said, no, you should go and do a fashion course. And I thought, I don't know how to get into the film business. So I ended up doing a 4-year fashion course.
Wow.
That was my degree. And then still didn't want to work in fashion, wasn't really interested in fashion. And then I think I'd done some stuff. I got a job in theatre, dressing. We had a lovely actress in this country called Barbara Windsor in a pantomime. And so that was my first gig, dressing pantomime. And then I dressed all the spear carriers at the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, who came up to Newcastle. And then we saw an advert in one of the Guardian paper. The BBC were advertising for holiday relief assistant costume designers. And what that meant was that everybody at the BBC was a staff member. It was probably a bit like your old studio system,
sure,
where you were there full time. And so people would go on annual leave, usually in the summer. And so to cover the quota of all the shows that the BBC were making, they needed to bring in people. And that was me. I got in as an assistant costume designer, and I was there on and off for about 8 years.
Wow.
It was a great fantastic training. And I assisted some amazing designers. You were put from you did all sorts of things. One day you could be sorting boots out in the basement, German boots out in the basement for a war drama. The next you could be dyeing satin shoes for a troupe of dancers. It was a great grounding in costume. And that's how I got started. And I was there for 8 to 10 years. And then slowly I'd had a 3-month contract. I thought I was coming to London for 3 months from Newcastle. I'm still here 40 years later. I'm still in London. So eventually what happened, there was something called Producer's Choice came in, and they wanted younger and younger designers. So the old school of designers was sort of getting, which is horrific really, pushed out. And they wanted young blood, the young producers that were coming in. So that's how I started. I got a gig with a director called Antonia Bird.
Yeah, sure.
Who did Face.
Did Face, the movie with Robert Carlyle, right?
The first thing I did with her was a drama called Safe. And then I did something, it did have theatrical release, a film called Priest.
Yeah, sure.
Which was about a homosexual Catholic priest. And then we eventually went on to do Face. So that's how I got started. And then they moved me into the BBC at the time. Were doing very prestigious one-off films within the bounds of the BBC, and it was a Screen 1 and Screen 2 series, and some really good films came out of that. And so I met lots of directors. They were like one-off films. That's how I got an agent, because my CV just had one-off films on it. And then one of those directors wanted to work with me again, and I got a cold call from a producer saying, my director wants to work with you, can I send you a script? And I said yeah, and by then I'd left the BBC. I decided I wasn't going back, and so the producer was Roberto Pasolini, and the script was the full Monty.
I was going to say, because you've worked on some great stuff. I mean, when you read the script, the full Monty is a movie about taking your costumes off. So
I know. I know. And everybody says that, but there were no clothes in that film. It bloody well were.
Yeah, it's the oldest joke in the world. I'm sure you've heard it a million times. But you were really off to the what's interesting. You did full Monty. You did a movie I really liked too called Sliding Doors. You did Face, Antonio Bird, like you teamed up, and then you did 3 films with Woody Allen. I'm a huge Woody Allen fan, such an influence in my own life. And Matchpoint is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, that was the first one. That was a really good gig to get, because at the time it was very excited. Everybody was very excited in London that Woody Allen was coming to London. I don't know why he came to London, but I think there were issues in New York, but we won't go into that. But anyway, he came to London, and he didn't interview me. He has a fabulous producer called Helen Robin, who I met in a bar in a hotel. I'm trying to remember which. I think it was the London Hilton. I can't really remember. I think. Anyway, we met, and I walked in with my portfolio, and she asked me if I wanted a drink. So I said, yeah. We had a drink. We just sat and chatted for ages. And I knew every costume designer was going for this interview. Every single costume designer in England was going for this interview. And I thought, well, I'll just go and I'll have a chat. I'm not, I don't think I'll get it. There's much bigger designers than me. And I got the gig. And I remember the first time I met him, and I'd done loads of mood boards. He came in. Once he arrived, he came in. I remember he came into the office, and he was really shy. And I really had an out-of-body experience, because it was like, oh my God, I am looking at Woody Allen. And I'm a big Woody Allen fan anyway. I loved all his movies. And the reality of him walking into me and discussing my mood boards was just kind of, okay, you better concentrate, Jill, because, get over the shock that you're actually sitting here with Woody Allen. And we got on really, really well. I mean, I think, doesn't like costume. He doesn't really respond to costume.
Right.
He would rather the actors just wear their own clothes. He was, but great. And I loved him. And we had a very easygoing, easy relationship. I think he felt relaxed with me. His assistant told me he did. So that was great. And,
I mean, obviously he brought you back 2 other times. You worked with him multiple times, which speaks to not just your ability, but your ability to work with him. Well, that brings up the question. I mean, you've worked with a lot of, you work with Anton Fuqua on Infinite, and now you're working with and we'll get to this later, but the relationship, I can't imagine. The relationship between Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise is, I think, one of the great success stories of the last 15 years, certainly in Hollywood, in terms of collaborators being able to really create exactly what the public wants and create great entertainments. But before we get to that, what's it like when you develop a relationship with a director? I mean, for you, when you're on a project, is it the script that attracts you? Is it what the script allows you to perhaps do, or is it the director and the actors? What is it that attracts you to a project?
Sometimes it's just I need a job.
Touche.
Touche. No, it's the script. It's the script. First of all, it's got to be something I'm interested in. None of us, unless we're really, really, really lucky, none of us get the pick of the peach jobs. Some people do. Right. There's a top 1%. And, we could all sit here and say, oh, I wish I'd done that job. I'd love to have done this. I'd love to have more opportunity to do this, and this. But, you've got to go with how the whole thing falls in for you, And so, I guess it's the script. I've turned lots of things down because it's been a repeat sometimes of what I've done already. But also you get a feeling when you go and meet somebody if you're actually going to get on with them. There's got to be some kind of an ease about it. There's got to be, for me, regardless of the director's reputation, I've just got to feel that I can have a relationship with him. And I pretty much know very, very quickly if that's going to be the case.
Right.
And if it's not, the case, I'll sometimes walk away. Now, like I said just a couple of minutes ago, sometimes I just need the job, and beggars can't be choosers sometimes,
Right.
So I wish I could say to you, oh yes, I choose my jobs because of the script and the reputation of the director. That's not always the case. But in an ideal world, the script, and then to see if you actually get on with the director and the producer.
Right. Yeah, yes, because they're the ones that are getting you paid.
And they're the ones that might give you hell over the budget. So I think it's to me, it's a really collaborative effort. most directors I've worked with have invited my opinion. I've never worked with somebody who's such an auteur that I'm not allowed to contribute anything. I'm trying to think, have I ever been in that situation? I don't think so. It's a very collaborative effort. And so I have to feel that I can speak easily to somebody.
Sure. Well,
Does that make sense?
No, that makes absolute sense. Now, to go even further, it was funny because I told you I went and saw Dead Reckoning again yesterday because I want to see it in a Dolby Cinema. And there was a trailer for A Haunting in Venice, which is the new Kenneth Branagh Hukiri Peru. How you pronounce that? I always miss. But I was thinking that that's interesting because you worked for Kenneth Branagh in Shadow Recruit, Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit, and I was going to ask. So, what is your relationship with actors like? Because I've often said to people that you cannot, when it comes to actors and you're producing movies, you cannot skimp on your catering, but you cannot skimp on your makeup and your costume designer because that's your first line of defense to allow an actor to get into that character. And costume design is so important when it comes to working with actors. What is it like to work with actors? And when you're working with a director like Kenneth Branagh, who is also one of the great actors on the British stage, what was that like? And was it different working with a director that's also a very accomplished actor?
Okay, so Ken and I, he interviewed me many, many years ago for something, and he was the first person ever when I went for an interview asked if I wanted a glass of wine before I sat down. And,
my man.
Anyway, yeah, he didn't give me the job. Thanks, Ken. Anyway, years later, I'm doing my work with Marilyn, and he came in as Olivier, and I think he appreciated, because I love research, and I really enjoyed the research. I'm a huge fan. I've always was a huge fan of Marilyn. So I had hundreds of books, and so when I got to meet Ken, I had all this research, and he responds to that. And I'd done my homework. I knew all about, I love cinematic history. So I knew all about Larry and Vivian and the making of The Prince of the Showgirl anyway. And so he knew what I was talking about. And we had a really good working relationship on that movie because every night I would go in to see him, to tell him what we were doing the next day, because it was a really complicated costuming for him, because sometimes he was Larry. If anybody doesn't know, Larry Olivier directed The Prince of the Showgirl. So, but he also acted in it. So when we were making this, sometimes Ken would be dressed as Larry, the actor in The Prince and the Showgirl. Sometimes he'd be dressed as Larry, the director on The Prince and the Showgirl. Sometimes he'd be dressed as Larry in his private life. And sometimes he'd be dressed as half and half, half director, half actor. And so it was a very complicated, we were jumping about a lot with different looks. So every night I made it my job to go in, see him, tell him what we were doing the next day, and did he agree with me? And I'd had it all planned out what he would wear. I mean, there was lots and lots of photographic reference of Larry directing this movie, and so we followed a lot of these looks. We had some artistic license, a lot of artistic license, but I wanted to get it as right as possible because some of the people that worked on the show, Prince and the Showgirl, were still alive, and so I had some fantastic pictures which I got from the BFI, the British Film Institute, of Larry directing the movie, behind the scenes stills, great pictures of film crews, everything. It was great. So he loved all of this. So he and I got on very well. And he asked me one day when I was helping him get dressed, because I always seem to end up dressing him as well. He asked me one day what my budget was for this movie. And I told him, I was like, seriously, no money. And he was really impressed by that I'd managed to do everything. I think I had for the whole movie £100,000, which is very, 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 very small costume budget. and he asked me, because he'd just done Thor, and he said, "Do you want to know what Alex Burns' costume budget was?" I said, "Do you know, I don't think I do." Anyway, he told me, and I said, "Oh wow, okay, that's a huge difference." But anyway, he was impressed, I think, but that I'd managed to achieve what I'd achieved on such a small budget. And so a little while after that, I got a phone call from him or his people saying, they wanted me to look at a script that he was going to do. And it was something called the Guernsey Literary Potato Peels and the Potato Peel Pie Society, which was a book, lovely, charming book, all set in the Second World War.
Wow.
We started the movie. We didn't finish the movie because we couldn't find a leading man, so it closed. And I thought, oh, well, that's the end of my, dealings with Ken Branagh. And then literally about 4 months later, I got a call again saying, could they send me a script? And I went to see him, and I got this script, and he wanted to see me the next day. And I said, look, I haven't had time to prepare anything, and he was talking to me like, costume. And I said, I haven't had time to prepare anything for you. He said, no, he said, you're doing the job. And that was Jack Ryan.
Wow. Well, what's interesting about that is that's a Skydance produced film. I mean, through Paramount, and obviously the Mission Impossible franchise became a Skydance production.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, that's David Ellison's production company. They've done Star Trek with Chris Pine. They've done Mission Impossible. They've basically been co-financing most of Paramount's major slate for the better part of almost 20 years now. So to get into that family is probably a good thing, to be working. So Skydance becomes aware of you. You're part of that team.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that had any bearing on moving forward with Mission Impossible, but it's definitely a good place to be, I think.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm very grateful. It's fantastic. I mean, interestingly, Lorenzo de Bonaventura had been the producer on Jack Ryan with Mace Neufeld, and then moving forward a few years, Infinite with Antoine. Lorenzo was involved in that, and I think what happened with the Mission franchise, they needed a costume designer quickly, and Lorenzo had nominated me, so hence I got a call.
I used to work at Warner Brothers 30 years ago.
Oh, did you?
And I worked for the Bill Young, who was the senior vice president. He was in charge of physical production for the studio. And I was there when Lorenzo first started as an executive. And he was always very nice to me. And like I was always sneaking into research screenings, and he would be there if there were Warner Brothers movies, and he'd just shake his head and laugh at me. And then I made the one and only movie I directed 25 years ago. He watched it and actually gave notes. So right. For me, and from my perspective, he's one of the nicest guys.
I love Lorenzo. Yeah, I think he's fantastic. I remember going for a dinner. We went for a dinner. I don't know why we were going for this dinner. Heads of department. I think it was after a studio show and tell. And I sat between Mace and Lorenzo. And the two of them together were just kind of bouncing off each other. But their lives, I mean, they'd led fantastic lives. And I just sat there between the two of them going, wow, okay, I've done none of this. They're just fantastic lives and enjoyed themselves. Enjoyed themselves. I think he's great fun, Lorenzo. I'm a huge
Mace Neufeld fan. He's no longer with us, but
no.
I was having lunch with a buddy of mine at this cafe called the Fabiola's Cafe that used to be right across the street from Paramount, right there on Melrose. And there was like nobody in this place except this guy sitting in the corner and my friend Mark and I. And for whatever reason, I'd watched Clear and Present Danger, which is obviously the third Jack Ryan movie. And I was quoting it because I love that movie, and I was just telling Mark, I'm like, I love this movie, and I, for whatever random reason, I was just talking about Clear and Present Danger, and it's not like it was new, I'd watched it on, I was watching on Laserdisc or something before DVD, the DVD had come out, and this guy who's sitting in the corner comes over to our table, and he's kind of like this gruff guy. He goes, listen, my name is Mace Neufeld, and we're like looking at him. I couldn't believe it. He's like, I can't tell you what it means to me to hear people randomly talking about you. You don't know who I am? And I'm like, no, sir, I didn't. He's like, so you weren't trying to like put on a show? I'm like, I had no idea. I just watched the new DVD or whatever it was, and I'm a huge fan of your Jack Ryan films, sir. And he was, well, that's great. It's great to hear that about them. I'm glad you like them. And then he left, and that was my one experience with Mace Neufeld. But I just love the fact.
He was delightful, lovely man. Man.
And he worked all the way up like into his 90s, I think.
Oh my God, yeah. He probably dropped down dead on a set. I don't know, but I mean, he was getting on. And what I was thrilled about after we, like I say, it was a studio show and tell. And he sat and he said to me, he said, I've done a lot of studio show and tells. He said, I have to tell you, he said, it's the best studio show and tell I've ever seen.
Wow.
Jack Ryan, which was, I thought, wow, okay. Given some of the people that you've worked with in your career. No, he and Lorenzo said, yeah, it was the best show and tell we've ever.
Well, this, you've just brought up a question for me. So Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit was the 5th Jack Ryan movie. So you had Hunt for Red October, you had Patriot Games, you had Clear and Present Danger, and Sum of All Fears.
Yeah, and then
Shadow Recruit. And it's interesting because you had 3 different Jack Ryans before Chris Pine.
Yeah.
And so you're coming into an established franchise, the 5th movie in a franchise, which in a way kind of, I mean, obviously you've had the same star in Mission Impossible, but you're joining with Mission Impossible, like with the Jack Ryan series, you're joining a franchise late in its life.
Yeah.
For you, getting a job on something like Jack Ryan, and then I would ask you to parallel the experience with Dead Reckoning, what's it like having an established franchise to look back on? And for you as a costume designer, is it intimidating? Is it exciting? What's that like for you?
I wasn't intimidated by any of it. I felt that the project I was doing, the film I was doing, was a standalone.
Right.
Particularly for Jack Ryan, because it was a different actor. And I respond to the actor. I mean, it's been different with Mission because Tom is Ethan Hunt, and he always has been Ethan Hunt. And there's a very strong dialogue of what Ethan Hunt is, what Ethan Hunt would wear. And you're not going to change that. And you accept the job on that basis that, it is what it is with Ethan. He's the same character. I think with Clear and Present Danger, because it was a different actor, you had a bit more leeway. And Shadow Recruit, not Clear and Present Danger. Shadow Recruit, you had a bit more leeway because he was a different actor. And there'd also been quite a gap, I think, between the two.
There had
the last one and ours. So we really started from scratch on that. So I wasn't intimidated by that at all. With Mission, no, I wasn't intimidated. I understood that, you were not going to do anything groundbreaking with this character. He's a character we all love and recognize. And so that's fine. You just go through the process of finding the right things and also the things that he is happy and comfortable to wear. And also, with Mission, it's not just how he's looking. He's got to be able to work.
Right,
in
function.
His clothes because what he is doing, boy, is it physical.
Yeah, well,
it really is.
I mean, I want to get into that. Like I was telling you before we started, I think that for the 21st century, the team of Chris McQuarrie McHugh and Tom Cruise is one of the great pairings in Hollywood histories in terms of doing studio tentpole films. I mean, they had met on Valkyrie, I believe. I mean, I don't know if they met before that, but
I think it was Valkyrie.
So Chris McQuarrie, it was Chris McQuarrie reteaming with Bryan Singer, and Chris and Bryan had done The Usual Suspects, and Chris won an Oscar for that screenplay. And then they teamed up on Valkyrie, and of course, Tom Cruise played von Stauffenberg. And that was, I know that Bryan and Chris were going to make that for a lower budget. When Tom came on, it became a bigger budget film. And by the way, I think that Valkyrie is one of Tom Cruise's most underrated films. People forget.
I only saw it, I only saw it recently. I'd never seen it before.
Oh.
And it was showing, well, look, I'm sure he's got a conspiracy against me, because I said to him recently, every time I turn TV on, there you are. I said, I can't get away from you. Every time, there you are. And since Dead Reckoning's been opening, they've been running in England all the Mission films, and then late at night, some of his other films, Valkyrie being one of them. And I thought, I'm going to watch this because I've never seen it. Fascinating story. I mean, I was always interested in the story, but I'd never managed to see the movie. And he's great. He's great.
He's great in it.
I've got to stop sounding surprised, okay? Because he keeps telling me, why are you sounding so surprised when I say he's a great actor?
I mean, I'd met Chris a few times through Brian. I've only ever met Tom Cruise once in my life, and it was interesting because it was at Laser Pacific in Hollywood. I think it was a Sunday morning, and I had got there with my girlfriend at the time, and nobody else was there. And I think that times Brian had told me he wanted me to come to this screening. I'm like, and Brian called me up and told me to do something. I'm like doing it because I made all these documentaries for him. And Tom Cruise walked in, and he's looking at me like, oh, hello, like, who am I? And he's got to be careful. And I ended up, as I told you, I had this conversation with him for an hour. And we had the most incredible conversation. And I just asked him one question. I said, can I ask you a question? He said, fine. I explained who I was and why I was there. I said, how do you choose? First of all, it's complimentary about his career because I love the people he's worked with. I'm a huge Tom Cruise fan because all of his movies, if you look at his entire career, especially like post Risky Business, post 1983, everything that Tom Cruise has done, he's worked with incredible collaborators in terms of screenwriters, in terms of directors, and everybody he's worked with. And so I asked him, I said, hey, how do you pick your projects? Is it the actual quality of the script? Is it the story first? Is it your collaborators who you're going to work with, other actors and a director, or is it a combination of the two? And that was the one question I asked him, and we were off to the races. And he was so focused on me, and I was asking him about Paul Brickman, who made Risky Business, and then I was just speaking extemporaneously about his life. I mean, his business life, and because I was such a fan, I think he was impressed that I knew this stuff off the top of my head. So he knew I wasn't bullshitting him. But what was interesting about him, I wish that somebody would sit him down and talk to him about the business of making movies, because he knew so much. And I was like, man, I really would wish he would sit down and talk about his career, because he's so knowledgeable and really understands.
He's a real student,
It really studied. So when you come in on this relationship, like you came into this relationship with these two guys that over the course of the past 15 years, whether it was Jack Reacher, whether it was the scripts that Chris McQuarrie had rewritten for Tom, Top Gun Maverick, obviously, McHugh was a producer on that, as if I know him. I mean, I know him with Chris McQuarrie. And then, of course, they had two previous Mission films, and now they're doing this monster two-parter. When you came into this relationship with these two guys that they probably think each other's sentences. They don't just finish each other's sentences. They probably already thought what each other is thinking before they've even spoken. So when you come in on a relationship like that, what was it like for you? And how did it begin? How did you find your way into this? Because, they'd made, obviously, there's 6 previous Mission movies. There's McQuarrie and Tom Cruise had worked together for a long time, and you hadn't worked with them before.
Never, no.
So what was it like?
Right,
how did it begin?
Tell you how I got it? Okay. So I got a call from my agent saying, how would you feel about stepping in on the Mission? And I said, no, I don't. I'm not going to. And then she said, well, would you just take the call from the producer? I said, okay. So it was Jake Myers at the time. So Jake rang me and he said, I asked him a bit about it. He was telling me they were looking for somebody and that they were going to start up. They'd been shut down in Venice because of COVID.
Yeah.
We didn't know what COVID was going to become by then. So they'd shut down and they wanted to restart in Rome in a couple of weeks. And I said, well, no, I'm not interested. And he said, well, would you just go and meet Chris McQuarrie, the director? And I said, okay. Would you go up to Long Cross Studios tomorrow and just go and meet him, just to talk to him? He said, I'm flying to New York, but I'll be on Zoom. So I said, okay. So I went up, I drove up, and I bumped into the first AD who I knew, Tommy Gormley, fantastic Tommy Gormley. And he said, oh, thank you so much for coming in. And so I thought, well, okay. I went in to see McHugh, and he was talking away to me. I knew the leading lady because I'd worked with her on a Woody Allen, Hayley Atwell.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked how she was and blah, 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 things like this. I was quite direct. And Jake was on Zoom. And they were explaining, that they wanted to go to Rome. They'd been shut down in Venice, but they wanted to carry on in Rome in a couple of weeks. And I then said to McHugh, do you want to tell me what it's about? Do you there's no script. We don't have a script. Do you want to just give me some scenarios? Because he was sort of talking. So he gave me these scenarios of where they were going, what they were doing. And I remember thinking, okay, fine, I'm not touching this with a barge pole. So I remember getting out of the office thinking, I said, bye, good luck with it, and I went back I went home and I rang my agent and said, no way, there's no way I'm doing this. It's, they haven't got enough time. I'm not taking this on. It's too stressful, blah, blah, all those things. Anyway, then COVID really kicked in.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we all know what happened. So I found myself up in Cumbria, which is the north of England, stranded because they'd called lockdown and I was stuck up there. And I kept getting calls from my agent saying, how many weeks do you want prep for this? I said, I've said I'm not doing it. And they kept coming back to me. And I said, at least 10 weeks. I said, at least. I said, I've spoken to your supervisor, things are not as in place, because you haven't filmed anything really. You haven't filmed anything. So, I'm not doing it. And anyway, they came back again. What if you had 10 weeks, would you consider it? And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know. And then another call came and said, Tom Cruise wants to meet you. And I remember saying to my agent, why? I've said no. Why? Anyway, I was stuck up in Cumbria with my iPhone. I didn't have a computer. My iPhone. Will you just take the call? So I said, okay. So I had my iPhone literally, there's 4 little pictures on it. And I'm looking, and McHugh was there, obviously, and Jake and somebody else was on the call. And I was about to say, well, where's the movie star? And I heard this voice from this little picture. Heard the very distinctive voice. And I said, oh, okay, I thought he's here. So, and then we just started talking about old Hollywood, and I love old Hollywood, and he loves old Hollywood.
Yeah.
So we were talking about...
And he knows his stuff.
Oh, he knows his stuff. So we were talking about, Indiscreet and Ingrid Bergman. We were talking about the yellow sou'wester that Debbie Reynolds wore in Singing in the Rain. We were going on and on and on talking about this. And I said, look, if I did this, I would expect a lot of you. Because on Infinite, Mr. Wahlberg, who I love and adore, and Mark Wahlberg, if you listen to this, what I'm going to say here. I got, 55 minutes in his garage in LA to fit him for lots of... And he 55 minutes, I flew all the way to LA with 11 suitcases and we got 55 minutes. So I said to Tom, I expect a lot more from you than I got from Mark Wahlberg, i.e. 55 minutes in the garage in LA. And
Did he love that?
Oh, yeah, he laughed. He said, oh, no. He said, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do the other. So anyway, I was still saying no. So I remember saying to them at the end, oh, goodbye then, good luck with it. And they came back a few days later and they said they really want you to do the movie. And I thought, well, okay, realistically, when are you going to work, Jill? When are you going to work? COVID's hit, you've been out of work for 9 months. How long could you? Nothing's going to start up. They're offering me this job. I love the franchise. I'm a huge fan of Mission Impossible, have him. So I thought, okay. So I said yes. And then we were up and running and, boy, were we running. Because it was, and then they announced to me that you've actually got 9 weeks, not 10. We're going to start shooting in Norway, and the first time I met him face to face, he came in to look at what was on a rail, and he said to me, look, he said, we're really going to concentrate on this sweater. This sweater's going to save my life for this stunt.
And that was the first thing you shot, too, the motorcycle jump off.
Yeah, it was. And I said to him, that's a lot of pressure on a sweater. Too much pressure on a sweater. And that was it. We were off. It was, crazy.
Well, one of the things, I mean, I suppose for you, one of the things I really liked about Dead Reckoning is there's a lot of new characters. You know, obviously you have people like, I know Esai Morales was somebody who came in, it was going to be Nicholas Hoult at first, and then it became Esai Morales. And then you had people like, Haley Atwell, who you'd work with, and you had Palm Clementif come on, and she was like, I loved her she looked like she was one of the Joker's hench people with the drum majorette. Yeah. And then one of the, Shea Willingham, but one of my favorite things too is they brought back Henry Czerny from... They brought back Kittredge from
Kittredge from number one,
who was also, speaking of going back, he was in Clear and Present Danger as well. He was the villain in Clear and Present Danger, and like when you bring back, like, I'm a huge fan of character actors that you've seen in a bunch of, like when Henry Czerny is doing Henry Czerny, doing that Henry Czerny thing. It's like the greatest thing ever. Like, and the fact that I think when I heard his voice in the first trailer for Dead Reckoning, I'm like, oh my God, they brought back Kittredge. So you had a lot of new characters with which to dress. So, Ethan Hunt is going to dress but Ethan Hunt was wearing a lot of nice suits. He more suits than maybe he normally wore. So when now that you have the job, now that you have these new characters, many of which we'd never met before, where do you begin? Now that it's a well-established franchise, even McQuarrie and Tom Cruise have done 2 of these previously. This is a new one, new mission, new characters. How do you start? What's the first thing you do besides finding a sweater that's going to save Tom Cruise's life?
Yeah. I always start with the actor and who the actor is and what I think the actor can carry. Character comes into it as well. Like Haley's character, I felt she was a very strong, empowered woman. And also with Haley, she's got such a great face. I didn't want anything to detract from that face. So I wanted a very simple wardrobe for her. I wanted her to look amazing, but I wanted it to look not considered. I wanted it to look easy, like she hadn't thought about. She was a girl that threw things on and looked great, whatever she did. And that was the vibe I was trying to get for her, that she just naturally looked great without too much thought. There are some women who try really hard and are dressed very well and overdressed and overthought out. She was not this girl, I didn't think. And that was my starting point with her. And everybody seemed to respond to that. So, that was the way we took it. And I think I'm the designer, but she looked bloody good, I thought.
She looked fantastic.
She does. Well, she can, she's got a great figure, Haley, a fantastic figure. But there are certain things she can't wear, and she's you've got to accommodate all of that. And but when she looks great, she looks great. And so I think we got it right there.
Now, did you consult with Tom and McQuarrie?
Oh yeah.
About, like, in advance, did you come up with looks for Gabriel and looks for Grace and looks for Paris?
We did mood boards for every single character. Lots of mood boards. And so they had a look, and Tom gets very involved with the costumes. He likes to get involved. He was very involved with Haley's look. So there was a lot of dialogue there. Yes. And so, but again, it was very collaborative, it was like, well, what about trying this? What about trying that? And right at the beginning, we did have costume tests. We did. And most of the things that we put on Haley, she ended up pretty much wearing.
Oh, that's great. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, because it was unexpected, there's a briefing scene. in near the beginning of the film where there's a bunch of different governmental agents, and they just put all of these incredible actors in a single scene. Like, you don't, and this is like catnip for me. I love scenes like this. They brought back Charles Parnell, the actor who was in Top Gun Maverick. I love that guy's face. I mean, I love the way he looks. He's there. You had Indira Pharma. What's that?
Yeah, fantastic. He's got a fantastic face.
I love his voice.
What I loved about that scene, it was very, to me, Dr. Strangelove. It was
totally.
Very, it was very, very slow, considered. I thought it was a great scene. I loved the scene.
I could have watched a movie for 2 hours with just them talking about what they're going to do about, and that's, you see Henry Czerny in that scene. You see Carrie. I don't know how I missed this. I didn't know Carrie Elwes was in the movie. I actually interviewed Carrie Elwes when I was in high school when he was in a movie called Lady Jane with Helena Bonham Carter. When he's a kid. But I've always loved him. I've always loved Carrie Elwes, and I didn't know he was in the movie. And in this scene, could they have put, and you had Rob Delaney, and could you have had a cooler scene? Now, in that particular scene, when you have all these character actors, it's going to be their only scene in the movie. What's it like for you as a designer? Like, what were you told by Mr. Cruz or Mr. McQuarrie about, because you had to convey the characters, like who these people were in costume immediately. Yeah. Like you didn't have time. You're like, you get it. They're government operatives or from different parts of the service. How did you approach a scene like that in terms of the costumes?
Well, we knew Rob, the McHugh wanted Rob in uniform, Rob Delaney in uniform. But Carrie, we wanted a bit more relaxed. It was his office they were in. Right. They'd all gone to visit his office, so he could be jacketless. For scenes like that, it's you've got to get some different. You've got to make everybody look a little bit different, because there is a danger. Yeah. In an office situation, a corporate office situation, it's like a uniform. With men, you could all look the same. Right. So there was a lot of attention went into the ties, the color of the shirt. I was careful that, we didn't have too many blue shirts in there, or too many similar ties, or that sort of thing. That was what it was based on. And also, again, what looked good on the actor. Charles is great. He's tall, great shoulders, can carry most things. Henry is a clothes horse, standard off the rack, just puts it on, it looks great. And lovely Mark Gatiss, who's a British actor. That's right. And I love him too. Oh yeah, he's great. Well, he and I bonded over old black and white movies, because he loves old black and white English movies like I do. From the Ealing Studios, with Alec Guinness and Kind Hearts and Coronets and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, we have a TV channel here called Talking Pictures. I don't think you get it in the States, but we have it here called Talking Pictures, and it's all those little black and white movies that people have sort of forgotten. And he, for some reason, I don't know what, he's connected to Talking Pictures, or he's one of the faces of, they like him. And so he came in one day with all this merchandising from Talking Pictures to give to me, because so I have a hat, a badge, a calendar, and we were the pair of us were sitting in between takes, naming all the old British stars on these calendars to see, who knew who. So it was a bit of a competition. Yeah, he's a delightful man. So yeah, I would say that when you have a scene like that, the trick is to have a little bit of, try and get the differences in the characters. Because we didn't know their characters. There was nothing written down. Right. Like I say, we don't have a script. And I remember being completely freaked out at the start. And Eddie Hamilton, the editor, said to me right at the beginning, because I said, how am I going to do this? There's no script. What am I going to do? How do I know how to dress these people? And I was going, spiraling up. And he just said, Eddie very calmly just said, let it go. Just let it go. He said, if you're worried about the script, you will never get anywhere. He said, just let it go and deal with it on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I did. And then I said to McHugh towards the end of shooting part one, I said, I'm going to find it really difficult to go back to a director with a script. Because, when the director says to me, as per script, Jill. And I said, I'm going to find that really difficult. And he said, you already said, he said, I love that I've done that to you. So.
Well,
No, we don't know.
Another great thing, obviously, coming from England, the idea of Bond villains and Bond hench people has been something that we've seen since 1962 and Dr. No. In this, you have Esai Morales as Gabriel, and you have Palm Clementief's Paris. I was thinking about her as his assassin, his hench person.
Yes.
And there was a first of all, I really liked the way you dressed him. He seemed, utilitarian, but also at the same time
I'll let you know first. He had the most money spent on him. He had the biggest budget for his wardrobe.
Really?
Yeah, he had the most money, I think. Well, apart from Tom, because we spent money on Tom because he had so many repeats of things. But Esai had,
Yeah, Esai he's I've been a fan of his since he was in a movie that was directed by Rick Rosenthal called Bad Boys with Sean Penn.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say it's like 82 maybe. 82, 81, and it's youth in prison, and it's him and Sean Penn going after, and Ali Sheedy's in it too, and so is Clancy Brown. I love this movie. It's the first time I ever saw him as an actor, so I love the fact that he's in this movie as like the villain. I really love that. So when you're dealing with villainy, what did McQuarrie tell you about these characters, and how did you settle upon Palm Clementief looking like some kind of Joker-esque deadly drum majorette? How did all that come about?
Well, I'm trying to think about Esai. I think I was just left to my own devices. I think I just gave a mood board of what I wanted. Esai, to me, Esai himself is very cool, and again, when you look at the actor and you look at the way he dressed himself, I thought, well, he could carry this, he could carry that. So I put a mood board together. I wanted this character to be luxurious.
Right.
I wanted him to be relaxed, easy, and luxurious. He had to shout money. And that was my basis for Esai's character, Gabriel. And so, looking, when you meet Esai, he's now a silver fox, fabulous. We're looking at colors for him. I found things like he wore Brunello Cucinelli, he wore Xenia. Just so I was going around finding things that I thought would work on Esai, that I felt were within keeping with the Gabriel character. I wanted him to be European. Right. I wanted him to have a European vibe. I was thinking of Gianni Agnelli. Fabulous, much taller and skinnier than Esai, but still the vibe, that look, was what Esai was based on. We just did a mood board, and McHugh liked the mood board, so I was just left to my own devices to go and get on with it. The Paris character was a different kettle of fish. We thought about her being I wanted her rock and roll.
Okay.
I wanted her rock and roll. I'm not sure McHugh was as convinced as I was about this.
That's what collaboration's all about.
Yeah. But, and Pom, who was a very, very cool girl, very, very cool girl, had her opinions as well. And so, she had a lot of say, and we were trying lots of different looks on her. And the leather kilt and I call it the David Hemmings jacket from Charge of the Light Brigade, the adamant jacket we made.
Well, that's I was saying drum majorette, but that's first of all, I love that choice. I don't know why, but even the makeup that she was, there's a female comic book character named She, who's like a SHI, created by Billy Tucci, and some of those looks kind of reminded me of that, and I always liked that look and like the way she had makeup on, and I thought that's kind of a bold choice. You've never seen that before, and that goes into the whole henchman thing, how the henchmen sometimes are more flamboyant than the people they work for whatever. Yeah. And you really got that from her, because obviously she was the murderous She was, in my mind, she was the Joker of the bunch. You know, she was.
Yeah, she's kind of the killing machine. But I wanted a cool, slightly rocky killing machine, punky, rocky killing machine. And I think it was quite an organic thing. You know, we were finding our feet with her through various fittings of what we were going to do. And you know, where she's running on the train, when she's running along the train, she did have on originally a short leather jacket. And McHugh, when we were on the train and we were in Norway, in the middle of nowhere, McHugh said, I want her in a long coat. I want her in a coat. So it was like panic stations, because we were literally in the middle of nowhere asking people if anybody had a coat on their person. And we did find a black coat, which is what she's ending up in the movie in, on the train. But yeah, she wears clothes incredibly well. You could put Pom in a black plastic bag and she'd make it look cool. She really would. She's a real fashion. She knows about fashion. She understands fashion. She's a very cool girl. So we had fun with her.
Yeah, I mean,
I had a lot of fun.
It definitely shows. Another thing that you got to do that I thought was really cool was sort of the cold open of the movies on a Russian sub. You know, and you're in a Russian submarine, and you get very sort of that Hunt for Red October, Crimson Tide vibe. Again, going back to Jack Ryan, you know, the beginnings of the Jack Ryan franchise. But even they had like those were very cool uniforms. I really liked the uniforms. They didn't necessarily look to be authentic Russian uniforms. It looks like they were created, or were they authentic? Like, where did you? Because I really liked the look.
They were authentic. That's what the Russians wore.
Oh.
We made them. We had to make them. We bought on eBay an authentic Russian uniform.
Okay.
We got one. And then we had to make, so marching.
Because they looked vaguely, because it's an experimental submarine, they looked vaguely futuristic, a little zhuzh maybe.
Yeah, well, what we just fitted them slightly better, because the Russians aren't that well fitted. So we fitted them slightly better. Marcin, again, a fantastic, Marcin and Ivan, who were the captain and the co-captain. I never remember people's ranks.
Right.
You know, they wore clothes very well. Again, those two guys wore their uniforms incredibly well. They were fun to do. But that was research. You know, we had to get that right. We're representing a Russian sub.
Right. Okay.
I mean, look, McHugh keeps saying it's mission. You can do what you like.
Right.
But it is within the realms of reality. You know,
well, it was cool. I mean, I thought it looked great. I mean, put
really
me on
good scene.
It's a great, really such a good scene. And it was what a great way to open the film.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting for those people who might not know what the term dead reckoning means. Dead reckoning is navigating at sea using things that are not moving. So that's where the first term originally came from. And I was like, what is it? Why is it called dead reckoning? And of course, there's many different meanings, but if you want to take it more of the literal meaning, it kind of starts there. And I'm like, okay, now I know, you know.
Now you know.
But
now you're on that ride, yeah.
Which was good.
That wasn't the original opening of the movie. Not originally.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, I was going to ask the scene after. Well, it's actually the third scene where Ethan goes after Rebecca Ferguson's character, which is another great.
Yeah.
I loved. I mean, the desert garb that you put everybody in, both the bounty hunters, but then Ethan Hunt and Rebecca Ferguson. That was incredible. Like I loved the way those costumes looked, and especially played.
Well,
I love that whole sequence.
It is. It's a good sequence. I'm a huge fan of Westerns. And so I was begging to let me put him in a duster coat. I was desperate to put him in a duster coat. So I got my way. And
it's awesome.
And she also had one. I mean, he didn't have his on for very long. But it was great on the horse. And he had the most beautiful horse called Zeus. God, this horse was unbelievably beautiful. And they were shipped out from Abu Dhabi, these horses, from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, where we shot in the desert. They were fabulous, fabulous horses. It was amazing time doing that. Amazing. But all that stuff, all the assassins were built from scratch. What I did, we went to pull various samples. We had a look, what I thought. I wanted something that was, well, McHugh wanted something that was a non-recognizable bunch of people. So we were just trying to find interesting shapes. And there was a lot of talk about one of the assassins who Rebecca Ilsa's character becomes. She dresses up like we had a cotton mask against the sandstorm. He loved the way that the nose and the mouth were shaped in this mask. And you see it, you get quite a close-up of this. He loved all that. So, and I wanted it all one uniform color. I wanted them just to blend, like a mini army, really, but with differences.
No, it was great. And there's kind of a leader in that group who's got the different face, so you can identify him more the white and kind of the which made it so they weren't just nondescript. They had I know this guy. This guy's like the leader. So that was really well done. I mean, another thing I had to ask, and from a production standpoint, I was thinking, so when you're in the airport, was everybody there? Were they all extras?
Yeah, it's the brand new airport in Abu Dhabi, but it wasn't open to the public. They were still building it. We were on a building site.
Right. Okay.
So it was. It's an amazing building. Amazing building. But we were, it was still a building site. We were, going various areas and they were still putting it up. But no, it was, they were all us. It was all us.
I mean, I was looking at that because there's so many. It was great because it looked like it was so packed with people. You guys did such a great job. Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, so in a scene like this, for people who, might not know a lot about when you have to get all those extras, they all have to be dressed. They all have to be, because it's an international hub.
Yeah.
So like, what is a day like that for you when you've got literally, I would imagine, hundreds of people, that are in a scene like that?
It's a very long day. It starts very, very early in the morning. But what had happened, we'd all been filming in the desert before we got to the airport. And McHugh had decided that he wanted a load of agents in this airport, special agents, and they weren't cast. And so we'd gone to Abu Dhabi, we'd taken shed loads of stuff, it had all been shipped over, and he decided he wanted 14 agents. And he wanted them by Wednesday, and it was now Sunday. So I remember sending Charlotte, my assistant. We were in the desert, and I remember saying to Charlotte, my assistant, she's a fantastic assistant. She's been with me 25 years. I said, you're going to have to go back to Abu Dhabi. You're going to have to get, the crowd team and you're going to have to go shopping. You're going to have to start at least, and then I'll come back tomorrow because I had to wait and see Tom with something on camera. And we're going to have to just shop. And thank God the shops weren't, closing with COVID. It was all open in Abu Dhabi because we were right in the middle of COVID at this point. And so it was just frantic shopping for 2 days for 14 people. And what people probably don't understand, when you do a fitting, you've got to have 3 times as much in the fitting
sure.
to get one outfit. So I think we just bought the whole of Abu Dhabi, and it was shipped into our hotel where we were based from. And we were frantically fitting. We had 14 actors who'd been coming in from all over the world to fit.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Now, so this sort of begs the question, because there's so much action involved, how many multiples did you have to make of your principal's costumes? Like when Ethan Hunt because he's in the same outfit from the time he's on the motorcycle to when he makes that jump to when he gets on the train, and which is like probably, what is that, 45 minutes, or even it's a long extended sequence in the film. How many multiples for Ethan Hunt did you have to make?
Am I giving away trade secrets here? We had a lot. And also, with Tom particularly, with any stunt, you have to accommodate what is going on with the stunt, i.e. if somebody has to wear a harness.
Right.
Or knee pads, or arm pads, elbow pads, or a chest rig, whatever. Sometimes, depending on the stunt, I mean, he had very, very little on for doing that stunt in jumping off the cliff. Very little. He had knee pads on, and that was it. That was it. And then he had his parachute. But so with that costume, we had lots of different variations, different sizes, like different leg widths, different leg lengths, because sometimes you see him standing up and sometimes you see him on the bike. So we had bike trousers, pants, and we had standing up pants. We had various sizes of sweater. Yeah, a lot. I've got a great, it's funny, I've got a great picture because those pants were made for him, and we had to dye the color of the fabric because we couldn't get this fabric in the color we wanted.
Right.
So I just found it the other day. I've got a great picture of Charlotte and myself, and we've got rolls of this blue fabric, but they all came out a different color blue from the dye batch. And we're trying to decide which one, which color. And then we had to keep sending them back to the dyers with samples. Every single roll of fabric that we were sending them all to a factory to be built because they're all the same pant. It's just, we had to get different sizes. And every single goddamn roll was a slightly different color. So that was it. And remember, we're doing this. We have 9 weeks. We have 9 weeks from the time I met him face to face and he said the classic, "This sweater's going to save my life," to when we were on that ramp in Norway.
Wow. Okay, now I have to ask you this too, curiously. I had heard that when this movie was screened for the first time, I guess for executives, it was like 3.5 hours long. And they can't, the first cut of the movie was much longer. Obviously you can't, for commercial reasons, you can't put a movie that long in theaters, a movie like this. I
heard we were rivaling Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. I mean, what was amazing to me when I was sitting in the theater, and I was the second time, this movie feels like it's less than 2 hours. Like it's one of the movies where you don't feel the time at all. There's been very few movies in my life that I've watched a movie where it tricks you because it just whips. So you have no idea how long it is. And when it was over, when I saw it yesterday, I was like, God, did they cut parts out of this movie since I saw it? Because it went by so fast. But let me ask you this. Were there characters in this movie that have been removed? Were there scenes in this movie?
No. Well, I think scenes, yeah.
Yeah, there had to have been a lot. I'm sure there was a lot of scenes.
Yeah. Characters, no. Everybody made it into the movie. I'm trying to think of anybody that was dropped. Probably the only people that were dropped, but they didn't really have lines per se, were the agents that we'd run around like idiots to get ready.
Right.
14 agents who I don't think got a lot of camera time.
Well, that was something I didn't. We talked about the agents, but I didn't ask about Greg Davis or Shea Wingham because they obviously represented a different faction, the American government. They're trying to bring him in.
Yeah.
And I like the way they were dressed, utilitarian, but they represented another faction. I guess the agent, because they're part of the agent, that faction. Did they? Obviously they couldn't overshadow anyone, and I liked the way they were dressed. But was that part of the agent team, or because the two of them were front and center, did you give them something a little bit extra to make them stand out more?
Yeah, I mean, we'd fitted them long. I mean, the other agent team, was very last minute. So, but we'd fitted them before we'd got out to Abu Dhabi, the airport scene where they figure. They had to look real. They had to look like they would work. They had to look believable. Shea had to look like, he would throw that jacket on and a shirt. That was just his style. Tarzan, Greg, was a younger version.
Sure. A little bit
more youthful in his style. But I just wanted them to be believable. They couldn't be so cool that they wouldn't. I wanted you to feel that they got their hands dirty.
Right, and I think I like that. I like the way they're dressed. I like those characters. I mean, that was a lot of fun. And
Yeah,
then
they're fabulous boys. I love them.
Yeah, they were great. Now in Rome, suddenly you have all kinds of local cops. You've got the Rome police, the Italian police. Now, were those costumes that you were making? Could you go to the Italian?
We rented. There's Italian costume houses that have that, so we were renting all of that.
Yeah, I mean they've
Thank
got
goodness.
I was going to say they have a long history of I love Italian crime thrillers, and I own a lot of them, and I figured but there was a lot of them, and again
there was a lot of them, and a lot of judicial. That the judge maybe that scene was cut. We did have a judge, I think.
They go in. Yeah, that scene's there, and there's the whole thing in the courts and all that. Yeah. Again, those great casting, by the way. All those actors in Italy, great casting. Yeah. I mean, everybody looked fantastic.
Great. That was really. By then we were really filming in the height of COVID, and what was to me, and I'll always have this memory. It was a real privilege to be able to go to Venice. I don't know if you've been to Venice before. I have. But when you
neither had Ethan Hunt nor Grace had been to Venice before. So I feel like I'm not.
When you go to Venice, no, you're not alone. But
I'm not alone.
Go to Venice, if you go to Venice, it's heaving. It's always heaving with people. It's so busy. And St. Mark's Square, it's bouncing. It's full of people and pigeons, and we went and it was deserted. And it was magical.
Wow. Yeah, because
I mean, utterly magical. And it was we had a ball in Venice. It was utterly magical. And it was, for me, a real privilege to see St. Mark's Square deserted during the day, and at night as well, because St. Mark's Square's bouncing at night. But it was just fantastic. There was a point in Venice where the Italian government called a curfew. So we had to carry papers. And we were doing a few night shoots, so we had to carry papers on us. Otherwise, we'd be arrested or prosecuted. So I felt like I was in a Second World War escape movie, like Cold It, because you had to carry your papers. And there were people marshalling the streets, Italian cops marshalling the streets to check. And I was constantly running back to the hotel to get something, from the Ducali Palace where we filmed that big party scene. And our base was, it's very spooky Venice at night. I wasn't always happy running back to get something in these spooky, don't look now type. I was expecting a little red ball.
Nice reference for those of you people. Don't Look Now, directed by Nicholas Roeg, Julie Christie, Donald Sutherland. It's one of the great ghost stories you'll ever see. You'll never look at Venice.
That person in a red coat with a knife. So I did keep thinking when I was running back in these deserted streets with my papers ready to show the cops that I was legit. That, this little person with a red knife, with a red coat and a knife would come out and get me. It was, my stupid imagination. But anyway, I
just like that you think it's nice to know that you know that film. That's the impressive part,
Yeah, big Nick Roeg fan, yeah.
Me too. I'm a huge Nick Roeg fan.
It was a real fantastic time, and I remember they closed Venice Airport, and I had to get back to London. We had more fittings to do, and Charlotte and I they drove us from Venice to Rome, the pair of us, and we were in a people carrier. And there was a driver, and we were driving down from Venice to Rome, and there was like going through Checkpoint Charlie. We were stopped every few miles by a police checkpoint, and we had to open the door. I remember this door sliding, and they asked for your papers, and the driver kept saying "Mission Impossible." It was amazing. It was amazing. They just waved us on through. It was a great experience. Fantastic.
I mean, it sounds like it was so much fun. It looks like it's so much fun. I remember seeing clips of this. They have this thing called CinemaCon where they show in Vegas, where they have all the exhibitors that show movies, people that own movie theaters, independent theater owners, and they showed clips from this last year. Tom Cruise has made sure that the people at CinemaCon, he'll shoot an intro on a plane or some crazy thing, and hello CinemaCon, and seeing clips from this film, I mean, it was insane. And I know that obviously there was a lot made in the press of the COVID, what was going on during COVID, and how Tom Cruise is very, adamant about, because it's his movie. He's the producer. He's beholden to every dollar from the studio, and he's being responsible. It had to have been, I mean, this was sort of the forefront of the business during COVID. This was the movie that was happening during COVID, and I think that in a way it'd be interesting to go back and read an account. Like, I'd love to read a book on the making of this movie and see how that worked, because being international while COVID broke out and having to deal with all the different things, and being in Abu Dhabi and being in Norway and being in Italy, it would be fascinating to read an account of all of that, like the behind the scenes and what everybody had to deal with.
We were struck down several times. Crew members were isolated. They had to stay in their hotel rooms. It was stringent. I mean, I remember doing fittings in Italy. We were in Rome, and we were in a basement, and I looked like I've stepped out of some nuclear sci-fi movie, because I had goggles on, I had my hood up, a Socko suit on. I belted mine because I thought, I'm going to at least show I've got a waist. And, all your ID badges on, your gloves. Yeah. That's how you had to fit people. And, we were tested. We were PCR'd 3 times a week. We were told that you had to wear your mask if you were anywhere near. We were all in bubbles. We were all in zones.
Yeah.
So you weren't allowed. We all had hotels in different zones. So you weren't meant to cross-pollinate with another zone. I mean, it didn't always work out that way, but that was, it was stringent. The rules on and everything. You were always hand sanitizing. You were told you couldn't talk to somebody longer than 15 minutes in their space.
Sure.
You then had to leave the space. You had to have your mask on. It was really difficult to work. You had to have a mask, and you had goggles, or you had a screen. Those masks were horrendous. Hated it, but you had to do it.
Now, when you were making this movie, you already knew that you were going to go into part 2, I would imagine, or did you have to wait?
No, I didn't.
You didn't know.
I didn't know. I thought I just signed on for 9 months, and I remember it's distinctly standing in when we were doing the Rome courthouse, that sequence where Haley's been marched between the two. Into the court, and Tom and I are standing there, and he said, I've just got to tell you, everybody looks fantastic, blah, 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 blah. And I was just saying to him, when are you going to start part 2? When are you going to start doing the second one? How long are you giving yourself between? And he just said to me, not when I start, JT, when we start. And I said to him, look, I said, we've got a long way to go on this movie. I said, I would reserve your judgment until we get to the end of this to see what sort of a screw-up I might have made. I said, because I'm not immune. I said, before you suggest that I'm going on to part 2. And that was it. It was never up for discussion. That was it. I was just drifted onto part 2.
Now, how much time between because, after shooting, obviously going to editorial, they had a release date they had to make. So what was when part 1 ended, when the physical production wrapped and you were done, you were wrapped out, how long until you started working on part 2 took place?
We were never wrapped out.
Really? Wow. Well, did you get a script? That's fantastic. So wait a minute. There was never down. You just went. It was like literally filming one right after the other.
Yeah.
So that's. I mean, I've often thought, and I've never quite understood on these movies. After Lord of the Rings was made, after what Peter Jackson did doing all 3 movies, and it wasn't as easy as making them all at one time because I had to go back and do pickups and stuff like that. I worked on documentaries on the making of the first Lord of the Rings movies. So we did 10-hour documentaries for each of the 3 films. So I've always thought, if you're going to make a sequel, why not do it and film concurrently? Because you can amortize costs if you're having the same sets or do all these kinds of things. But obviously you're going to want to have new characters and new costumes and new locations. But
I thought I would get some downtime, but I didn't. Some of my crew got downtime.
Right.
We didn't get downtime. And also, how they work, and I don't know if this is common knowledge or not. I've heard them talk about it. If they don't like something, we reshoot it as we go.
Right. Yeah.
We don't wait.
Right.
Till they get a final cut, and then if they're not happy with something, we'll come back to it a couple of weeks later and reshoot it.
Well, I can imagine that's part of the benefits of having someone like Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise working together, in that you basically have, in terms of a formidable front, you have your writer, director, producer with your star producer, and both of them, they don't strike me as people that are like going to do Michael Cimino on Heaven's Gate and be like, I want everything I want. They're probably acutely aware of the business aspects of producing and how to do things effectively. I would imagine that's part of their
that their main rebate, I feel, with them is, how can we entertain the audience? How can we get better at entertaining the audience? We want to get better and better and better. And they're on a constant, I can't speak anymore, a constant, adventure of trying to find what is better, how they can entertain the cinema audience. That's what they're about.
Yeah, well, and they control that.
They do.
I think that's their strength, and I think that's something.
Great. Yeah, what's great when you're with them together, they spark off each other.
Right.
And ideas are coming out all the time. And McHugh has said himself, he finds a script restricting because it doesn't allow you to you get bogged down with what's on the page as opposed to what's in front of you, and hey, what about we try this?
Right.
And what's fascinating to be part of that with them and watch them work, it's constant. When McHugh was in with some of Tom's fittings in the beginning, it was a constant backwards and forwards of ideas. When we're still trying to fit a costume, and I never knew what I was fitting for. I had no clue. I was fitting to a scenario. All right, he's going in the desert. Okay, what are you doing in the desert? Well, we don't know yet. So and then when we're doing the fitting, hey, you could do this. What about we do this? So it's a constant stream of ideas pouring out of them of what they could do to make a better film, a more exciting. They're on a mission, literally on a mission to produce a more exciting, to better what they did the last time.
Well, on that note,
it's fascinating to be around.
I can only imagine how creatively energizing that has to be.
Well, yeah, it is, because you're not bound by any rules. However, it's hairy.
Right.
Because,
yes, no doubt.
And by the way, I'll give you an example. Oh, I can't. It's to do with 8. I can't give you that. But
well, you could if you wanted to.
I can't. I'll get told off. I'll get my knuckles wrapped.
Right.
No, they constantly, you would be given a challenge like, the 14 agents. We want them all on Wednesday. So you are running around sometimes, frantically in a panic. How are we going to get this done? Because they've just thought about it. So
right.
It's you're on you can't rest on your laurels. You are constantly, which is good. It's kind of good. It gets nerve-wracking sometimes, and it's nerve-wracking because you say, "Well, what's this character doing? Where's he come from? What's his story? What's he doing?" We don't know.
Okay, I've got a question, and then we can wrap this up because I've kept you here for an hour and a half. This has been fascinating.
Oh, I don't mind. I can talk. It's fine. No time.
So we have this AI, the entity. How do I put this? How do I ask this question? Was there ever a time when you were working on this movie, or perhaps on part 8, when you, as the costume designer, aside from what Gabriel is wearing, did you ever have to anthropomorphize the entity? Meaning, if the entity was a human, you never had to do that. So,
no.
Okay, I was just curious if if you had a character, because here's the thing, when I was watching the movie, I saw Gabriel as like this acolyte of this AI system, like, because they say in the film that the AI, the entity, needs human agents to be its hands and eyes, and so I was thinking that. So in terms of what, and this was in my own mind when I'm, as an audience member, I'm watching the movie and I was looking very closely at what Gabriel was wearing, because obviously they established in the past that he had killed somebody dear to Ethan Hunt, and this was pre-Mission 1. And then, but now it was almost like I looked at, and this is in my own mind again, I looked at the end, that Gabriel as almost like a religious zealot. You know, that he had become this, he was a bad dude, you know, and a bad actor, as they call them, maybe a stateless bad actor, mercenary for hire, whatever the hell he was in the past. But now, and I saw it because of the colors he was wearing. You know, he wasn't just wearing black. You know, you didn't have him in black. He was in other suits, and like you said, he almost looked slightly angelic in the airport, maybe. And then he was wearing, and so I was thinking to myself, in my own mind, you know, is he the high priest? Is he the entity's high priest? And in my mind,
okay, well,
so I guess what I'm asking is, that's what I kind of mean. Is he that way? Can I think of Gabriel, because his name is Gabriel, you know, Ghost in the Machine, Deus Ex Machina, you know, I'm thinking along these lines. And just from a costume perspective, I kind of got that vibe with what you were doing. Now, maybe that wasn't intentional, but the way that the story was, okay. Because the way the story was unfolding, I was reading all of this meaning into that.
You know, all we knew about when we were prepping this was that there was a key. And I remember asking McHugh in a fitting, what does the key do? He said,
I don't know.
He said, I don't know yet.
Well, I mean, because here's the thing.
We didn't know.
But they call it, the key is, I mean, it's not like the imagery wasn't there. It's a cruciform key. It's a cross, you know, and you've got a guy, Gabriel, the angel, whatever. So there's all this religious iconography, and Ghost in the Machine, God in the Machine, you know, Deus Ex Machina, and so it was all there. I was just curious if you had intentionally brought that.
No,
and in part 8,
I wasn't aware that Gabriel was really. It became more obvious, but we'd fitted him by then. Right.
So because the movie's iterative, so. You know, I'm looking for things that I'm putting my film school student hat back on.
But I think what's great about this, you can read lots of things as you have into this. Now, they've afforded you the opportunity to read into what you want to make of this.
Well, even the light on the key, there's the red and white lights, heaven and hell, on that cruciform. It's 2 parts, you know, and I'm looking at all this going, okay, and so, and even they keep cutting to, if there's a physicality to the entity, it's in that submarine, because we see it, you know, the camera shots that looked to me like hell brain, or whatever you want to call it. It looked like a brain or a nuclear bomb or something. So it was, and I'm like, this is all intentional, right?
It reminded me a bit of the beginning of Doctor Who.
Totally. Yes, and all that. Well, listen, before I let you go, and this has been, Jill, this has been such a fun conversation.
That's fair, Lovely to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, this is fantastic. But I have to ask you, there's a lot of people who, what advice can you give the new generation coming up? I mean, now that we've got social media and people can share their work on Instagram, and I know that a lot of costume designers are on Instagram, what is some advice you can impart to people that, you know, might decide to pursue this as a profession?
I would say that you've got to have a passion for it, because it's a hard industry. It's a tough industry, and you've really got to want it. You really have. And I think you've got to enjoy it. I think you've got to have perseverance. And I was saying, somebody else interviewed me a little while ago, and I said, you know, the thing which I didn't realize about myself, and it's only as I'm the age I am now that I've realized, you just keep going. You get knocked back. It's the old saying, you know, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked back, it's how many times you get back up again. And, you know, I've been starving. I've not had work for a long time, but you just have to keep persevering, and you have to have a belief in yourself. And that's very difficult when you're out of work and nobody wants to know you and you can't get arrested. It's very difficult. But if you want it badly enough, you just have to keep going, head down, keep going. And I would say that to any young person. It doesn't come like anything, for some people it comes easily, for some people it doesn't. But I think if you really want it badly enough and you have a passion for it, you will get there by hook or by crook. And I think that's what I would say to younger people. Just keep going. Doesn't matter how many knockbacks you get.
I think that's good advice, you know, following your passion and be passionate about it. Which I think is, you know, I think that's anybody who's pursuing a career in the entertainment business has to have that, because man, it's a rough slog sometimes.
It is a rough slog sometimes. And I think, you know, you get lots of kickbacks, lots of put downs, loads of rejections. You know, you get to a point where you think, why didn't I get that job? What have I done wrong? What's wrong with me? All of those things, you go through all those emotions, and it's across the board. I mean, I know some people who've had it really easy and gone, you know, just go from strength to strength, and that's great. But the majority of us, you know, it can be a tough slog. So that's what I would say to people, you know, really make sure you have a passion for this. If you're just coming into this thinking it's going to be a glamorous world and that you're going to make lots of money, you're in the wrong business. You know, you really have to love it. You have to love it. I mean, I really love actors. I enjoy actors. I enjoy all their foibles. I enjoy their insecurities, their neuroses, all of these things, you know, that make up, you know, they're fun, they're interesting. I love actors. I enjoy being in the company of actors. And I think that's important, particularly if I'm dressing them. You know, there's got to be some kind of, you know, some kind of connection.
Absolutely. Do you have a social media presence? Can people follow you on Instagram or find you?
Yeah, Jill Taylor Costume Design, really imaginative. Jill Taylor Costume Design, that's me. At Jill Taylor Costume Design, isn't it? As I'm saying that to you, I'm just saying, just checking. I am actually Jill Taylor Costume Design. Yeah, I am.
There you go. On Instagram, Jill Taylor Costume Design. Jill Taylor
Costume Design, that's me. Yeah. I'm not very good at it, I'll tell you now. I mean, like I've managed 95 posts. But yeah, it's...
Hey, that's better than some.
Yeah, I'm not very good at it, because I think, why would anybody be interested in me? But I'm trying to get better. I am going to post some pictures on there of drawings.
Because you're the costume designer of a $300 million movie that's #1 at the box office.
I know. I can't quite believe that, but it's very exciting. It is exciting.
It is exciting.
No,
and the movie is exciting.
Who knew when I was a kid watching Mission Impossible on TV with Barbara Bain and Martin Landau and Peter Graves that I would end up doing...
And Leonard Nimoy, who later came on.
Leonard Nimoy, yes.
You know, it's funny. I just recently picked up the box set of Mission Impossible on Blu-ray. You know, in anticipation. I have a DVD. I have a DVD of them. I have to. I'm gonna cop to this. I'll cop to this to show you. So, because I'm susceptible to this. So, the Paramount as I get these over here. I wasn't going to show you this, but since you did, Paramount re-released the Mission Impossible movies in 4K steelbooks.
Wow.
So I had to get all 6.
Right. Look at that. That's amazing.
So, and they're great. I mean, the covers are fantastic. Oh,
yeah,
so I had to get them all. And the thing was, this is the crazy part. I already owned all these movies, but because they came out in these collectible steelbooks, and I had to get them all to be uniform. And
they look cool, though. They look cool. Yeah, I like uniform.
They're awesome. Now watch Paramount put Dead Reckoning Part 1 and 2 in different packaging, so the anal retentive.
That will be really upsetting. Yeah,
it will be upsetting. They'll do it though. They hopefully. By the way, if anyone on the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning production team sees this, could somebody make sure that you make the other 2 movies?
Packaging is the same.
That's all I'm asking.
I'm just looking as I'm. Hang on, as I'm talking to you. Is it here? Yeah. Sorry, I've left my. Look. So this is the box set.
Oh, of the TV show. Look at that. Hang on. Let me go full frame on that with you. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
And there's Barbara Bain and Martin Landau. Look at that.
My mom bought me these. Yeah.
Nice.
I loved it. Loved it.
It's great. You know who else loved it? Tom Cruise and Chris McQuarrie.
Yeah, they did. They did.
And you know, it's great. Well, listen, Jill, this has been so much fun, and thank you for coming on. So, Jill Taylor, thank you for being such a tremendous guest here on the Designing Hollywood podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Fantastic.
Take care.
And thanks very much to our sponsor for this episode of the Designing Hollywood show, the Costume Rentals Corporation. The variety of costumes at Costumes Rentals Corporation is expansive. CRC is recognized worldwide as the premier supplier of military and police costumes and uniform rentals. Costumes Rentals Corporation takes pride in its commitment to each customer, helping to produce the type of exceptional look needed for a successful production. A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from The John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.